Hello and welcome back to Business Ethics. This week we are going to focus on Chapter 6, what employers owe to their employees, ethically and rationally. In this chapter there are 4 parts, and we'll go over each and every one of them in probably a series of videos like it has been in the past. First part is all about the workplace environment and working conditions. The second one is all about fair wages. Third is all about labor unions, and the fourth part is about privacy in the workplace. And as an intro to this topic, we start to think about corporate representation. So in boardrooms and with executive level employees, you're getting everything that the company is doing, its values, its goals, how the employee benefits are structured, coming down from the top. And if everyone in the top, or most everyone in the top, is only representative of one demographic, in our case in the United States, white men, then it's easy to see how people with other kinds of lives and identities needs are unlikely to be fully met. Our book asks us to think about questions like, well, would we have better maternity and paternity leave? Would we have better health care? Would there be less harassment based on sex, gender, and race if these boards were more diverse? This was only 50 years ago, this picture, and even now there is severe underrepresentation of women and people of color in Fortune 500 companies in the United States today. And this just sort of sets the framework for what it's like to actually go to work. When we get hired somewhere, we have a certain set of expectations. We want our workplace to be safe. We want to be free from harassment. We want to be compensated or paid fairly. We want to be treated with respect. We want to feel like our jobs aren't just busy work and they actually contribute to something meaningful. So, in order to create an environment like this, our workplaces owe us something as employees. So in section 6.1, we're going to look at how to identify specific ethical duties management teams or corporate boards owe their employees. We're going to talk about OSHA. We're going to talk about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and how employees' expectations of work have changed over time. The first claim that our book makes is that the foundation of creating an atmosphere of respect, mutual respect, and a comfortable workplace lay in the hands of management. Management needs to model good behavior by being trustworthy, by being open and honest and hardworking, and not expecting their employees to do stuff that they are unwilling to do. A big thing is transparency, which means letting employees know what's going on behind the scenes. This can be really tough because there are laws and regulations in place for certain types of business activity to be secret. So if you own a business and you are trying to sell it, for example, there are all sorts of laws about how you have to keep that secret during the negotiation period from pretty much everybody. But aside from those rules and regulations, think about it from the perspective of the employee. And there might be rumors, there might not, but imagine you go to work one day and everybody's just laid off. No notice. That's not security. That's not a workplace that feels fair. And in this kind of transparency, laws have been passed specifically the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification, or WARN Act of 1989, which required this infographic. You need 60 days notice if your company has 100 or more total employees, and 50 or more are going to be laid off. There are exceptions, so new workers do not have to be notified, and part-time workers do not have to be notified. Before this regulation was passed, I think what they said was 7% of employers gave 2 months notice, and that's the 60 days. It goes up a little bit in percentage if you include maybe getting a couple days notice, but you can still see how this creates an atmosphere of fear, really. You need your job to survive, you need your wages to survive, and if you get roughly transitioned out of your job with no warning whatsoever, no preparation, your economic security is threatened. So one way that we can think about the ethics of what employers owe employees is to have as much openness and transparency as possible when there's not some kind of gag order in place due to laws and regulations. We also learn that WARN covers outsourcing. So if your company is going to go and give a bunch of jobs or recreate a bunch of their jobs overseas instead of in the United States, there needs to be advance notice of that. If roles are going to be automated, and if artificial intelligence is going to be implemented, resulting in the loss of jobs. Our book often talks about how you can think about being ethical by doing the bare minimum, sticking to the laws and regulations, or recognizing that the laws and regulations are in place to create a longer-term stable atmosphere for both business and its profits, as well as the stakeholders within the company that are producing the goods and services that get you that profit. They say near the end of this first section, ethical decision making and leadership in the workplace. Demonstrating the appropriate ethical standard for management often exceeds the minimum requirements of the law. The next thing they talk about, though, is actual safety. So before OSHA, before labor unions, when the Industrial Revolution was in full swing and factories were beginning to populate every city, not to mention mines for natural resources, there were very few worker protections, if almost any. People generally worked 6 or 7 days a week. There was no 40-hour work week or weekend. There was child labor. There were factories where the employers would lock people in to make sure that they didn't leave during the workday, leading to some massive disasters like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire right here in New York City. We get the example of this kid, Harry McShane, who lost an arm as a teenager and never received any compensation whatsoever, 1908. So right in the beginning here, under the section Workplace Safety, under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, we learn that OSHA was passed for the United States in 1970, 1970. So even though federal and state laws had been cobbled together in the previous decades, this was a blanket act that created a new agency whose only job it was to protect the safety of American workers. And OSHA gives you the right and responsibility to report workplace safety violations. Every employee is entitled to information about the safety of their workplace, including known hazards, ways to avoid harm in your particular industry, if there have been work-related illnesses and injuries reported at your company, and any kinds of tests that have been done to measure the types and number of workplace hazards that have happened at your company. OSHA has the power to fine companies who violate these orders. Sometimes people think that they're not enough, though. We get some examples in our book. One of the biggest ones was when BP's Deepwater Horizon exploded. So let's see what the numbers were. This is 2010, the biggest oil spill ever. And total OSHA penalties, our book says, exceeded 102 million. Some other big ones numbered 8.2 million, 8.7 million. And when we think about sometimes the multi-billion-dollar nature of these industries, that might not seem like enough. But you can also remember that there are other detriments to business when safety disasters like this happen, including loss of customers because of the neglect that has been demonstrated by the companies themselves. The next section we get in 6.1, where we're thinking about what kind of workplace environments need to be set up if you want to be an ethical kind of company, and it also has to be free from harassment based on identity markers or really for any reason whatsoever. And we know that common identity markers that are often the target of harassment are sex, gender, religion, and race. So if you come into your workplace and you are targeted because of those things, you are obviously not working within a fair environment. In the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, is a body that strives to get rid of this kind of targeted harassment. Our book gives us examples, which you probably have seen some of in the recent past. Matt Lauer was accused of widespread sexual discrimination and harassment and fired, as well as the CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick. I'm surprised they actually didn't talk about the more widespread fears of sexual assault and harassment with Uber, but I guess it doesn't necessarily constitute part of the workplace environment. There was a big push a couple of years ago, if you have not heard of it, to make riders safer on their Uber journeys. But specifically, when people high up in the management are the ones encouraging an atmosphere of harassment being allowable, then you can see again how the employer has failed in their duty to create a safe and fair workplace environment. So we say here, okay, sexual harassment includes unwelcome touching, requests for sexual favors, any other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature, offensive remarks based on a person's sex, and off-color jokes. So sometimes people come back with, hey, okay, well, we're going to have a better workplace environment if there's some kind of humor in our day-to-day life with these people that we're spending so much of our time with. And our book recognizes that. Camaraderie and good feelings for your coworkers as coworkers is something that should be encouraged. And the line isn't necessarily crystal clear all the time, but the law sort of is. If someone is in upper management, if they are the direct supervisor of the person that they are harassing, well, then the company is liable immediately. If not the direct supervisor, you need to report what is happening, and then if it continues, it officially becomes harassment. And of course, harassment can be perpetrated by anyone, men, women, people in upper management, or people who are in the less managerial side of any particular company. At the end of this section, we get a little wrap up, which transitions us into the next sort of consideration for a workplace environment, and that is non-wage benefits. But as we are getting close-ish to the 20-minute mark, I'm going to end the first video. This is the end of part 1, and I will see you in part 2.